This is DT Grant and the Practice Podcast, the place where we dive deep into the hidden world of healers. Today, I'll be interviewing someone from the southeast of the U.S. who discovered shamanism in his early 40s. For nearly 3 decades, he has been working with ayahuasca and is known as the Gringo Shaman of Peru. He runs a retreat center called El Purguero in Iquitos. And now, welcome Don Ron Wheelock.
Hello.
Dan, how are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah? I was bummed I didn't get to Iquitos this July.
I think things are always the way they're supposed to be.
I know. I went to the airport and I handed them my passport and I looked down at my boarding pass and it said, "Your flight is canceled." And I thought, I guess I'm not going.
Yeah, that's putting it pretty blunt. Your flight's canceled.
Yeah. It was only when planning for this trip that I learned anything about Iquitos. I didn't realize it wasn't accessible by car, so the only way to get there is by plane or boat.
And this year, the river's drier than
I
it has
know.
been in over 120 years. It's not good.
No, the world is all a mess everywhere. Part of the problem is there's no balance. If we have only rain, it doesn't work, and if we have only sun, it doesn't work.
That's right. And the majority of people would like to think that we have nothing to do with it. And I don't believe that, because every action causes a reaction. In the 60s and 70s, when we was looking at things, we haven't cut back on oil consumption any. And you can't make me believe all this oil's in the ground for us to just to suck it out and burn it. I think it's like the blood in our veins,
right,
in the earth.
There's a reason.
It has a purpose too.
That's right.
And people here are talking about, it tells about all these things in the Bible.
Does it?
I don't know. I've tried to read the Bible all the way through. I've got pretty deep into it. When I was in prison, when I got in pre-release, the guy I worked for, he was a free world man. He wasn't a guard.
It's important to note that Ron was imprisoned for selling marijuana decades ago. Ron has clearly been drawn to medicinal plants for a long time, but being imprisoned for this is pretty unfair, seeing how much marijuana is used for medical purposes now. But Ron made the best of his time.
I did inside building maintenance, and I did welding, and it was interesting, things I like to do. Mm-hmm. So it made my time go easier. And he was very knowledgeable about religion, and we had some really interesting conversations about religion. And I've known people who went to college and studied religion and would like to tell me we just live and die, end of story. And I've told them, I wish you could convince me of that, because life and working with these plants and things does not teach me that. Sometimes I would like to believe that we just live and die, end of story. It would sure simplify things.
Yeah, it would.
I've asked preachers, can you tell me who or what is God? And they look at each other, and I can tell you what is God. God is everything. He's you, he's me, he's the air I breathe, he's the food I eat, he's the ground I walk on, he's the plants I look at. He is everything.
First, let me tell you a little bit about how I met Ron. About 5 years ago, I heard about ayahuasca. I had never tried any hallucinogens in my life, and I was reluctant to try this one, but I was curious. In a pretty bleak moment, I thought, screw it, I'm going to try ayahuasca. I wondered if it could help me with some of my issues at the time. The idea of going to Iquitos, Peru, the gateway to the Amazon, was pretty daunting. So instead, I found a small retreat in Costa Rica as a place to dive into my inner psyche. A shaman would come up annually to work with his mentees who own this retreat center. So I jumped in blindly, something I'd done many times before in my life, and booked the retreat. Truthfully, I hadn't done much research on ayahuasca, and my biggest fear was that it would take me away from myself and I would come back psychotic. So by knowing very little about it, I was protecting myself from fear and anxiety around it. All I did to prepare was watch a movie on the plane ride down about ayahuasca. It was about a boy with major depression who was trying a last-ditch effort with ayahuasca to try to help himself. I was pretty surprised when I arrived at the retreat center and met Ron. I immediately asked him, "Are you in this movie? The Last Shaman," which you didn't like how you were portrayed, but I
Not really,
was...
but it's nice to be in a movie.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, you're really familiar. You look exactly like that guy, and it was you. That was my first introduction to Ron. Just to note, my retreat entailed 3 ceremonies of drinking ayahuasca. They were every other day. The day following the ceremony, we would meet with our group of just 7 participants and talk about our experiences with Ron. Prior to drinking ayahuasca, we were advised to set intentions. What was it we hoped to gain by drinking Mother Ayahuasca? I set a few intentions, but the most important one was that I wanted Mother Ayahuasca to help remove the walls I had built around my heart, which were no longer serving me. I asked Ron a little bit about this in reference to my own experience. So when I came down, you said Mother Ayahuasca brings you what you need. I can say how it worked for me. The first day, I felt almost nothing other than back pain. I told you about it in our first sharing session. And then in our second ceremony, you came over with a candle and took my empty purge bucket and had me lie on my belly. You said, lift your shirt, and you were waving those chacapa leaves from Peru over my back, and you were chanting and singing, and I thought you were done after the song ended. I was holding my shirt, and I felt you touched my spine, and then you stopped, and I felt something right on the spot where it hurt, and I thought, what the hell is that? And my hand was holding my shirt, and I could feel your breath on my hand, and I thought, oh my God, he's sucking my back, and he's sucking snakes out of my body, but I'm not feeling anything, and he is, and he's sucking snakes out, and then I was worried the snakes were going to take over your body, and then I was worried that you wouldn't get all the snakes out, and that there'd still be some in there. You would intermittently purge into my bucket, and then go back and suck more a few times. And then when you were done, you blew tobacco smoke to close the spiritual holes that had been created. I've found many ways to manage this back pain in the last few decades, but it always plagues me. And when I was sitting in that ceremony, this was what dominated. After Ron sucked my back, that pain was gone for many months, something I'd never experienced before. Ever since it started. So ayahuasca gives you what you need. So when he sucked my back, I thought, wow, that's really interesting and not exactly how I anticipated ayahuasca to help remove those barriers. Nonetheless, whatever happened helped. Now, moving on from my own personal experience with Ron, I'd love to hear his story. Can I ask you some questions about what you do? First, I want to know how you got started on this path.
Well, the way I got started, when I was around 18, Carlos Castaneda wrote his first book, The Teachings of Don Juan. And I read it. It was interesting, but it didn't really reach out and grab me. Probably in my 30s then, I picked up the books and started reading them again. And I'm like, so I got all of his books and read them. And I'm like, wow, they really reached out and grabbed me. So I'm like, this stuff is really interesting. And I've always been interested in indigenous people's ways of life.
Right.
As a little boy, I'm like, why did the white man come and wipe out the Indians? I'd much rather would have lived like that than we do now. And the only answer I've ever come up with all of these things is it had to be. Sometimes I think our destiny is written before we ever get here.
On an aside, do you believe in free will versus destiny? Or do you think it's already determined?
Free will, I think we have free choice. I have people that work with me and they say, I don't want ayahuasca very strong. I don't want to be out of control. And I'm like, you're not in control of anything. There's no controlling anything. Just because I tell people, look, I can come to this intersection. I can turn left. I can turn right. I can go forward. I can turn around and go back. I have free choice. But each one has different results. But that don't mean I'm in control of anything. I just have free choice. Hopefully we make the right choice, and then a lot of times we don't.
Right.
Or we don't think we do. But evidently it was a right choice because that's the choice we made. And then you can't go back and undo it. So these books really interested me. Then one day I had a friend, and he had this copy of Shaman's Drum, a magazine. And I'm like, I didn't know there was any magazines about shamanism. I said, So loan me the magazine. I'm the guy when you loan me a book, I give it back. Most people, you loan
Mm-hmm.
the book to them, you just well give it to them because you're never going to see the book again. So he finally loaned me the magazine, and I seen all these ads in there. A lot of, not all of them was to the rainforest, but there were a lot of ads to the Amazon and to the Andes and to Peru and these different countries. And working with ayahuasca, and I had no idea what ayahuasca was. I would have thought it was some kind of mushroom. So I didn't start inquiring about these trips. One day, a lady called me and says, "If I was to knock $300 or $400 off the price of my trip, would that interest you?" Yeah, tell me more. So she started telling me these things, and then at the end of the conversation, she said, "And we'll be participating in ceremonies with a very strong visionary plant called ayahuasca that the indigenous people in the Amazon have worked with that really set the hook." I said, "What do I need to do? You have a passport?" "No, I don't know anything about a passport." So I had to get a passport, and I got my passport, and I sent her the money, and came here in March of '96. It was my birthday's March 18th, so it was like my birthday present to me. To this day, it was the best thing I've ever done in my life.
So just under 30 years ago.
Yeah, and nothing in my life ever went so perfect. The passport, paying her, and going. It's the only time I can remember I've left on a trip that I didn't forget to bring something. I didn't forget to do something. I'm like, this is really uncanny. This is all too perfect. And at that time, there was flights direct from Miami to Iquitos. And we got here around midnight. Don Augustine Rivas was waiting for us in a bus. And I really connected with him the moment I met him. The woman offered me 2 weeks in the Amazon and a week in the Andes. So we came here. We drank ayahuasca twice in the jungle. I didn't want to leave the jungle. I really had to force myself to go on the rest of the trip, but I made arrangements with Don Augustine while I was here to come back in November the same year. And then we went to Lake Titicaca where we did San Pedro. And that part of the trip was interesting, but I really didn't resonate with the Andes or with the San Pedro that much. But
is it similar in any way? I've never experienced San Pedro other than going to the desert.
It's similar in the fact that it's a hallucinogen, but no, there's a big difference. When you do San Pedro, it's kind of like mushrooms. You want to go explore.
What I've recently learned about San Pedro is that it grows in the Andean region around 2,000 to 3,000 feet and has been used for over 2,000 years by traditional cultures. It contains many alkaloids, including mescaline, something that is also found in psilocybin and LSD.
Ayahuasca makes you look inside. Mushrooms and San Pedro and peyote, they make you look outside and explore. Ayahuasca is, in my opinion, in a class all of her own.
For those of you who don't know, ayahuasca has been used by traditional cultures for magical, curative, and religious purposes for over 1,000 years in countries like Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, and Brazil. Ayahuasca is a mix of two plants, the Psychotria viridis leaves, which contain DMT, a hallucinogen, and the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, which in Ron's camp they use the stems, the roots, and the bark. This contains alkaloids such as harmines, which includes monoamine oxidase inhibitors. These are used to treat depression. Normally, the DMT from the leaves are deactivated by enzymes in the stomach, but when mixed with the caapi vine, the harmines deactivate the enzymes in your stomach, allowing the DMT to be expressed. It's taken as a brew or a liquid that I would describe as tasting like burnt coffee mixed with molasses. It creates a sort of meditative state with visualizations and memories. Now let's return to Ron's story.
I came back in November of that year and stayed for 5 months and started my path with this.
Did you work with Don Augustine primarily?
Uh-huh.
And would you say your experience with shamanism, is it primarily ayahuasca, or do you do journeys of other sorts without medicine, or mostly plant medicine based?
With the ayahuasca, it's not just ayahuasca. And we consider ayahuasca the mother of all plants. In my opinion, and many people's opinion, this is how the indigenous people learned how to work with many of the medicinal plants in the Amazon through drinking ayahuasca. Mm-hmm. And I've had a few experiences where driving down the road or walking through the jungle, a certain plant will just stand out to me and gets my attention. And it starts appearing in different places. And then I'll drink ayahuasca and the plant will present itself and tell me how to diet with it and what to use it for. So I can relate to these teachings. Ayahuasca, we work with basically all the plants in the Amazon. And there's not any one ayahuasquero that will ever learn all the medicinal plants of the Amazon. Don Augustine told me there's like 750 medicinal plants to learn. That's probably not even very close. Children here learn at a very young age that you get sick with this, you go look for this plant. And they know how to use it. A lot of that knowledge is being lost every day.
Yeah, I remember doing an herb workshop in my 20s with this woman in northern Maine, and her grandmother taught her about the plants. And she said, if you just go out into the woods, the plants will tell you what they're used for. So it sounds like that's your experience as well.
Sure.
I'm sure you've helped many people with different things.
Yeah. If people tell me they need a healing, it's like, okay, now I planted a seed in my mind. That don't mean it will manifest. And there's some people who tell me they want healings, and when I drink, I get the message, no, they are not ready. And then there's times I get the message, go work on this person, and I never requested anything, and then they're like, how did you know to do that? Oh, no, ayahuasca just told me go do it.
So you mentioned a few times dieta. Can you explain that a little bit yourself?
And as far as I know, it's only the Peruvians that do this. I don't guess they do this in Colombia, in Brazil, in Ecuador, other parts. They say the best healers are Peruvian because we do plant diets. So sometimes you can diet several plants together if they're from the same family. But in the diet, no sugar, no sex, no salt. 3 S's. No sweet fruits, nothing with sugar. If you have bananas, they have to be green plantain bananas that are nothing sweet, not even 1 grain of salt. And we do this for extended periods of time. There's diets of 3 days, 7 days, 9 days, 15 days, 30 days. Most of the people here, when they diet, they're put into isolation in a little bungalow off in the jungle by themselves.
So nobody else, just them alone?
Just them alone.
Okay.
But a lot of them in a camp, and a little ways from the camp, they're private. And they bring them their food every day. The normal food is one should eat fish, but there's only certain kinds of fish you can eat. It depends on what the fish eats, whether it's good for you to eat. And lots of rice, oatmeal, quinoa, beans, lentils. You can have heart of palm. There's a fruit pea whey yolk. Some ayahuasqueros say you can have boiled eggs. Others say no. But you can eat chicken as long as it's cooked over a fire or in an oven with no seasoning at all, nothing fried.
Any oils?
No oils at all.
Similar to dieta, there are many ways to prepare for ayahuasca, mentally and physically. It's recommended that you avoid certain foods, especially those with amino acid tyramine, because the enzyme that is part of ayahuasca is an inhibitor of that which breaks down tyramine. Foods that should be avoided include salt, sugar, spice, oils, dairy, caffeine, pork, red meat, aged cheese, yogurt, alcohol, fermented foods, and large amounts of peanuts and chocolate. By following this diet, they say that the spirit world is much more accessible to you. They also tell you to avoid sex 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after drinking ayahuasca. This exchange of body fluids can deplete your energy and can inhibit the benefits of the plant's ability to guide you and teach you. It's also advised to avoid street drugs, as well as sleep medication, barbiturates, alpha and beta blockers, which are used for high blood pressure, and the antidepressants I already discussed, like SSRIs and MAO inhibitors. Now let's return to Ron's discussion around dieta. And do people drink ayahuasca during those times?
Almost all the diets. The only diet you don't drink ayahuasca with is with tobacco. When you diet tobacco, you do not drink ayahuasca. But all the others, I was always taught, when I do diets, I need to drink every Tuesday and every Friday.
So twice a week?
Twice a week. Years ago, almost all ayahuasqueros drank on Tuesdays and Fridays all throughout the Amazon basin. But now it's got so commercialized. People drink whatever day, whatever time. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we drank at 9 o'clock at night. But I don't know anybody does that anymore. When it's dark at 6 or 6:30, we drink.
What I learned about dietas is it's a contract between a curandero, which is a healer, and a plant spirit. And they negotiate how long the person does this diet and what restrictions there are. Oftentimes, the plant spirit requests that a person comes to do this diet. Usually, there's a special connection with the specific plant that is requiring this of a person. And oftentimes, the plant spirit offers to teach, guide, protect, and maybe endow special abilities to the person doing the diet.
When I did my first plant diet was with Ohe, which is very strict. It's 7 days. You eat rice, green plantain, banana, and fish for lunch and breakfast. We didn't have no fish.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't raised on rice, so 5 days I ate nothing.
Wow. That'll make you hallucinate.
Yeah, almost. But it was a very powerful diet. And when we broke the diet, Don Augustine had squeezed all this pineapple juice. I about overdosed on pineapple juice. That night, around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, ayahuasca came in my head and was telling me all this stuff. And I'm up walking through the camp, beating my head. I'm like, shut up. Don't tell me this shit. Pick on somebody else. This stuff is impossible, you're telling me. Leave me alone.
What was it telling you?
It told me I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do this and that. And I'm like, this is crazy. No one person can change the world. This is bullshit. Don't tell me this kind of crap. So in the morning, the group leader, I'm sitting on her step. Early in the morning, she gets up and she says, what are you doing up so early? Look, I'd give you almost $6,000 for 2 trips. I want 5 minutes of your time. And she said, oh, this afternoon I'll put 5 minutes aside. But I talked to her later and I told her these things. And she said, oh, these are all nice things, Ron. And I said, you know, ayahuasca told me she don't like people filling their pockets with her work. That this plant was put here for everybody, not only for people with money.
Mm-hmm.
And many people are getting very rich off of this plant, and she does not like it. And that if I'm going to do this work, to never charge for my work. Oh, Ron, these are all nice things. But if you think you're going to work with ayahuasca and you don't charge, you'll starve to death. And I said, well, then, if I don't believe what she tells me, then best I don't even pursue this path. So for many years, I never charged for my work. Here, or when I went to the States and people hosted me, I never charged anybody anything. And it was very profitable.
How was that?
I'd go to somebody's house, they put a basket on the kitchen table, and people put their money in there. And then my work started growing from that. For many years, I never did charge. It finally came to a point where, yeah, if you're going to do work, you need to charge.
Well, maybe part of it is you're providing food and housing for people, too.
Sure. I'm cheaper than almost anybody around.
Exactly, yeah. Are there people that you feel don't benefit or wouldn't benefit from ayahuasca?
Truthfully, yes. I mean, all that people talk about ayahuasca, yes, I think it's an incredible and amazing thing. But I see all these people that work with ayahuasca that claim all these changes, but when you really get to, I don't know if they really changed or not. It leaves me wondering. I mean, I know it's changed me tremendously, but I also know I'm still the same person. My life is my experiences. And not all my experiences in life have been so nice. And I haven't always been such a wonderful person either. I tell people, sometimes I'm like a diamond in the rough. You know, people just keep chipping away, and one day I'm going to shine.
That's right. Yep. On the medical side of ayahuasca, Some studies have shown benefits for people with various mood disorders like anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, and other things. And there's very little evidence of any side effects. Although folks who are on antidepressants such as SSRIs or monoamine oxidase inhibitors need to wean those medications before trying ayahuasca, the active components of many of those medications interact with the main ingredients of ayahuasca. If these medications are not weaned, you're at risk of developing serotonin syndrome from excess serotonin in your system. This is potentially a life-threatening condition that can lead to fevers, sweats, shakes, diarrhea, muscle rigidity, and seizures. And now back to Ron. So if you're not running a retreat, are you drinking ayahuasca?
I don't ever go more than a month without drinking ayahuasca. I drink ayahuasca for my health. My father died at 58 years old of pancreatic cancer, which in my mind is a very young man. And then I had two half-brothers that died in their mid-60s. And both of them died from pancreatic cancer. When I came here and stayed for 5 months, Don Augustine gave me a tree bark we cooked down to take a tablespoon every morning to help prevent arthritis, rheumatism, and a bit of an aphrodisiac. I took it for a month. But 30 minutes or an hour after I took it, it made me throw up, and I got tired of that. So I quit taking it. And right in my solar plexus, something didn't feel right and was there every minute of every day. And this went on for over a year. So I brought a group to Don Augustine, and we drank this resin from a tree, Ojai, which is a very strong purgative. And we had a sharing afterwards, and he's about halfway through the sharing, says, Ron has a problem with his pancreas. I said, wow, you really hit the nail on the head. And I told him about my problem and about the medicine he gave me, and I quit taking it. And he's like, Ron, don't worry about it. The plants are healing you. My first couple of years of ayahuasca were not pleasant. And then this night was no different. And a great doctor came in my visions and extracted my liver and worked on it with precious stones. I don't know how much time. It hurt so bad when he extracted it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I didn't.
What do you mean? How did he extract your liver?
He just took it out from my back, just took my liver out.
Were you doing ayahuasca at the time?
Yeah, in ayahuasca.
Okay.
This was in my visions.
Right.
And then he worked on it with precious stones for I don't know how long. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, all these precious stones. He worked on my liver for this time and then put it back in me. Another painful experience. When I woke up in the morning, I touched my solar plexus. I was like, wow, that feeling's no longer there. But they also showed me that I had to spend a night in a grave, to dig a grave, showed me how to do it.
You talked about
this.
What
about, if I didn't do that, a spider would come in the night and bite me and I would die. So I did that. I never had that problem again, and I drink things that should make me throw up and don't now. So I believe I received a healing on my liver and my pancreas. Incredible things happen with ayahuasca.
Do you feel scared doing it by yourself?
No.
No.
And when I started this work, my teacher put me deep in the jungle and told me to drink on my own. I would drink and it'd be super strong and it would scare the shit out of me. And I'm like, well, next time I'm just going to drink half as much. And I'd drink half as much and it'd be twice as strong. Oh, God.
It's giving you what you need.
So teacher Don Jose told me I needed to diet 1 whole year.
Whoa.
And I really, when I came here, that was my plan. And at that point in my life, I am pretty sure I could have accomplished it. But a problem prevented me from dieting. And now at this point in my life, I wouldn't want to try to diet 1 year. But when I was younger, yes. And then many times I think if I would have completed my dream that I came here to do, what would I be like now? Because my teacher, Don Jose, never told me personally. He just always said, you need to diet 1 year, nonstop. But I really wanted to do it. He never told me this personally, but he told many of my Peruvian employees that work for me at different times when they talked to him, Don Ron has a gift. If he would diet 1 year, the person does not exist in this world that would ever bother him again. I don't know.
Interesting. Were you invited to be a shaman? Did someone tell you were a shaman?
I was always curious. So, yeah, I wanted to pursue this path. Probably because I have a big desire. I like to help people.
It sounds like ayahuasca kind of invited you by telling you were going to change the world.
She told me one time that she knew me, that I could have not came to the jungle. That would have had consequences. I like to think I was the one who decided to come to the jungle, and she told me, no, I brought you here. I don't think these things, I just dreamed these up in my mind. I think they actually come from the plants.
Yeah. So I like to ask, what is your practice, whether it's spiritual, self-healing? What do you do for yourself? Is it drinking ayahuasca or other?
My experience and my work with the ayahuasca and with the plants and the healing is, more than anything, is self-healing for me. So this is why I drink ayahuasca. I drink at least once a month, whether I have anybody to drink with or not. But also by working with other people and doing healing work. When I do healing work on another person, it's like I'm healing a piece of me, because we are all one. So it's just another little piece of me that's better.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm glad it's been so long before we connected.
Yeah. So. Well, it was really fun talking to you. I always love talking to you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye. I'd love to thank Don Ron Wheelock for joining us today on this interview and for sharing his stories and experiences on his path to becoming a shaman and an ayahuasquero. And I'd also love to thank the band Modera Cayenne for letting me use their awesome song, To Find You. If you'd like to learn more about Don Ron Wheelock and his retreat center, El Purguero, please go to www.thepractice-podcast.com and follow me on The Practice Podcast. Also, feel free to rate the show and leave any comments you feel are necessary. This is DT Grant, wishing you a magical and inspiring journey towards health. Thanks for listening.